All right, everyone. First up to edit is this Rock Wren, and like I said in the culling videos, damn, I wish he would have turned the other way because I had such a great composition going with all this nice space out here, but he turned that way, and now the composition feels wrong. But I think there was just more stuff over here to the right, or he just, classic Wrens. They're just bouncing their heads back and forth so much, and he just never gave me the right pose out there. I think he did and close his damn eyes or something like that. Anyway, let's start with just switching the composition to vertical. Normally I'd offset it more, but I love these little orangey yellow lichens in there. So I don't want to lose too much of them. If I go all the way over, I guess I keep some of them. Because this feels a little too centered. Well, it's not bad. I think it makes sense because it shows. Let's go just to the tip of that one. There we go. I think that's a good middle ground. Yeah, let's try that. I really dig my exposure here. I'd love to get just a little bit more detail back in these highlights here, especially on that side. So let's see, does it really come back? I mean, if I went really dark, nah, it's blown out. It's just staying gray, so I won't bother recovering that far. I'll just do a little bit of recovery on it to get some detail back in those other areas. And then I don't think a shadow lift is really necessary. I mean, it gives a little bit more detail on his head there, but other than that, it's looking really good. I think actually I'm going to go darker with this, and then we'll come up here, we'll do a subject and then intersect, my classic move, right? Intersect with a radial right around the head here, just a big soft one like that, feathered to the max, and then we'll just go ahead and lift the exposure up on the bird's head there. So something like that feels really good. Okay, into Photoshop we go. I don't think there's a whole heck of a lot more to do in Photoshop here other than, there's nothing to clone. I guess let's burn the rock down in certain places and then try and dodge that catch light up in the eye. So I'll start with a curves adjustment layer, as always. And we'll bring down the highlight point and bring down the overall midtones there. I'm going to invert that mask, and then we'll just grab big soft brush. Let's make sure I have a completely soft brush here and paint with white, and we'll start painting in. I'm not going to paint on the real colored sections there because I just want to keep those popping out a little bit, but just more the lighter portion of the rock. It's really wild how that blue shows right there too. Really interesting. It's not like the white balance is off because all the other rock is kind of clean there, but in any case, this just kind of tones that down a little bit, I think, and helps keep our eye, and maybe that's a little bit much across there and there. So I'll just soften that back up. But that seems really nice. I wouldn't mind having that background be a little bit darker though. So let's see how easily we can do that. We'll just darken the background there. Actually, maybe just overall across the top half here. We'll paint it harder up top. And then I'll come back here, select subject, and we'll get rid of that darkening in that particular spot. So let's see how it does here. I'm going to zoom in, hide the selection, then I'm going to fill it with black. And it does decent, but not in there. So back to this selection that we have going. I'm just going to do a select and mask here. And let's see if this refine edge brush will help me out along these feathers. Much better. Better down in there. There we go. Yeah, that always tends to do the trick. I'll do a little smaller brush right through there. And there we go. That's looking better. All right, let me okay that. And then I'll go back, hide it, fill it with black. Now we got our bird nice and bright. Yeah, that works. Okay. So now we do that and really make that background darker. I do, however, want to leave that nice rim light along here. So I'm going to paint with black on that same mask just to kind of bring these values back up to where they were. Because remember when I first painted, I used just kind of a big soft brush. You can see kind of where, and in fact, if I go back, I'm just option clicking the mask so I can actually view it. And then I can completely paint that back in. And there we go. All right, last move on this one, I think. Another curves adjustment layer. We'll zoom way in on that eye. Ooh, that was a tough one to say for some reason. There we go. And just tiny brush, paint with white. We'll just hit that catch light. Maybe a little bit of the rock reflection there. and just bring a little bit more life to that eye. There we go. I'm going to just do a quick, I have a shortcut for contrast overall, before, after. I like a little bit of that, so I'm just going to lower the opacity to about 26%. So basically what that is it's just another curves adjustment layer that has these points added onto it and named contrast. So I have an action that I recorded to do that. So watch, if I just press the function 1 key on my keyboard, I get another one just like that, and then it's ready to go, and I can tweak it or paint on it, or as you saw here, lower the opacity so it just gives me that little shot of contrast, and then I think we're good to go. So from there to there, definitely makes the bird stand out a little bit more, and I think this composition works. It's not my favorite, but it's making something that feels balanced out of an original shot that certainly wasn't. And if we go back to our complete original and reset it, you can definitely see, a much more interesting photo resulted right here. Next up on the Rock Wrens series, this nice, darker, a little bit more dramatic rim kind of side lit photo here. I like this. I like the layers in the background, the colors back there, and the texture on the rock from that early morning sun. I am going to start just warming it up a little bit. There was a little bit of blue kind of tones showing all around there. I'm going to lighten it slightly. Then I will try lifting the shadows. Nah, it's not doing what I want. It is on the bird, but I don't like what it does to the background there. So we're going to get selective. So let's do a subject select. See how that does. Decent, but let's go ahead and subtract out a brush and get rid of all of this that it grabbed. There we go. Now it's mainly just a bird. And you know what? We don't need to worry about his legs, so we'll just go ahead and get rid of that because there was also selected in between there. Okay, so there we go. Now let's lighten the bird a bit. And now is when I'll do that shadow lift. Warm it slightly because that added a touch of blue. And then I'm just going to drop the blacks for contrast and see what that does. I'm going to turn it before and after. Yeah, that's that little pop that I wanted. I'm going to do another mask. Let's do a linear this time. Just going to drop it right there and drop the highlights globally to just see if I can tone down the brightness on those, mainly because I want the brightest spot to be this rim light on the bird. I'm going to do one more gradient. I'm just going to press M on the keyboard to get that linear gradient. Drop it up there. We'll just drop the exposure slightly. Darken that top half. Keep it nice and dramatic. And then it's time to go into Photoshop. Okay. Again, not a whole heck of a lot to do to this photo. These open, spacious scenes are pretty clean to shoot, which is really nice. I think I'm just going to lighten up some of these areas down here. I love how the light is kind of bouncing off the other side of the rock and glowing underneath the bird there. So let's just add a curves adjustment layer here. And I'm just going to lighten up the general mid to upper third portion there. I'm going to invert that mask. Let's get back to a nice soft pressure sensitive pen here, which means, or a brush, which means I can use it with my graphics tablet. And I'm just going to go through here and just start deciding where I want to add a little bit of lightning there. Lightning, like I'm going to add like lightning bolts in the background or something. I guess I should say lightning. Get really pronounced there. So I overlapped a little bit into the background, so I'm switching to black and then making sure I paint that out there. But something like that seems pretty good there. Watch this. Yeah, see, it just kind of enhances that glow. I love the glow. Whoa, bit too much of a zoom there. I love the glow coming through the bill here, so we're just kind of enhancing that as well. And then there's just these nice subtle colorations around the bird's head and eye there. So I'm just going to lighten those up real gently. Nothing too much, but just bring subtle more attention to them. And then the top rim light, I think, can use just a little bit more. Whoops, I went to the background too far on that one. So that's about where I want to go right there. There we go. Maybe even the underside of that bill. Just make that nice and bright. There we go. All right. Let's see if we can get anything out of that central reflection of the catch light there. I think we can. Kind of right through there. And you notice it shifts the colors pretty wildly. So I'm just going to change it to luminosity. And that should solve that. Yeah, there we go. Look, normal. Watch this. I'll zoom in more. That's normal blending mode. That's luminosity. So normal, luminosity. It's subtle, but it prevents the color from getting wild in there. And it brings just that little bit more life into the eye of that bird. Everyone, I think that's it. I think we just before, after. That's it. I love the dark, moody background already. I don't need to do a lot more to make this bird stand out. There we go. Let's save it and close it. I'll reset the original. We'll check it in Lightroom just so you can see the total before and after. And that was a nice, simple edit. It's really nice when I get it really close or almost exactly where I want in camera, which does not happen often. Although it happens more and more with mirrorless, you know. So look at that. So we go from there to there. Nice, decent difference there, but nothing crazy. So that's the before and after side by side. And there's our final image. All right, on to this third rock wren. This one's going to be a little bit more challenging. I don't love this little outcropping down here because we got a nice slope and then all of a sudden it just kind of juts out. So I think I'm just going to crop that out entirely, which gets rid of some of that junky grass over there, which I wasn't in love with either. And then I'll crop a little bit more of that out and we'll get rid of this later in post. And there we go. I'm just going to throw a big giant radial on here around the bird and through that kind of slanty thing in the back. I'm going to invert it and then we're just going to darken everything else and especially the highlights just to kind of tone that down and make that spotlight effect seem a little bit more happening right in here. So watch this, before, after, right? Just trying to tone down that. Now I think I went a little too far, so I'm going to back off of it a little bit just so it looks natural. I don't really see anything else I need to do here in Lightroom, so into Photoshop I go with this one. Pretty basic Lightroom edit. And then first things first, I am going to put my retouch layer on there, so it's just a plain blank layer. I'm going to start with the spot healing brush. Let's see. There we go. Get rid of that one. Get rid of that grass. That grass should come right out of there. That's all fine. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of that stuff down there. There's those other ones were just really screaming at it for attention, is what I meant to say there. Okay. Now I want to soften up these black spots. I'm actually going to do this on the cloning layer here, on my retouch layer. So I'm just going to use the regular clone stamp. Really low opacity is what you want to do. So maybe like 10. And I'll sample down here, paint some over, sample over here, paint some over, sample here, and just keep hitting these spots to just soften them all up back there. And I'm just sampling into the lighter, little bit flatter areas, you know, and maybe let's go up to 20% opacity and just kind of soften those crazy dark spots. They can be back there. It should be somewhat darker and have some variation, but I just didn't want them watch that dark. And see how that just kind of mellows out that whole background. And here's the trick that I use. I keep my eye on the bird here. Watch, keep your eye on the bird and watch me toggle. See how much more distracting those dark spots are? And then they kind of just fade away because honestly, I faded them away. That's pretty good. Let's start playing with some curves adjustment layers, doing a little dodging and burning here. So we're going to tame that down again, a little bit more burn, invert. Let's just take it through some of this area there, some of here, and just a little bit off the bottom of the rock there. And then maybe the lower side of this can tone down just a little bit so our brighter area stays around the bird. And then maybe a curves adjustment layer to kind of brighten and make the bird itself stand out a little bit more, especially on the head. We'll hit the breast just very lightly. I'm doing really low opacity on that. Again, I think that's about it. There's not much left to do. I'm going to go back to that burn layer and paint a little bit more in down there. I'd actually like that spot and that spot to be darker, so I painted it all the way. It's not going as dark as I want, so we'll do more with another adjustment layer. Paint that in there, a little bit there, and that kind of does it. So there we go, from that to that. And I think it does kind of help keep your attention going a little bit more to the bird and staying with that bird. Let's see what that looks like compared to the complete original. I think between the crop and the linear gradient I did in Lightroom, the little bit more burning and dodging I did here, I think we're going to see a decent difference that does help make that bird stand out, but hopefully nothing too drastic. So there's our complete before, there's after. Before, after. Yeah, it's subtle, but it's there. And you can just see how the bird just tends to stand out a little bit more there than it does here because of all the distraction that's going on in the rest of the scene. So there you go, another final image. All right, everyone, almost done here. We got second to the last image. We're going to start with one more of this rock wren. You guys tired of seeing this rock wren yet? I hope not. These things are adorable. All right, I'm going to crop and offset this a little bit more. I'm trying to decide, do I keep more rock or go more background? I think mostly more background, but I do want to leave just that little orange patch in there. So that seems like a good composition to me. I really wish this light was a little softer. The more I look at this as a tighter portrait like this, and I say tighter, I know for most people this would not be considered a tight portrait, but for me, it kind of is. In any case, just the fall off on this lighting is really tough. So I'm actually going to do something I almost never do, which is just lower the contrast here. I'm going to lift the shadows a lot, drop the blacks, because I do want to maintain a black point. You know, that's the one thing. When you try and reduce contrast too much, you can kind of really just wash out a photo and just make it look really weak and lacking. Now, between all those adjustments I did just darken the highlights a little bit there. It did lose a little bit of its color, so I'm just going to punch in a little bit more of that saturation. So let's look at just a before and after on that. From there to there. See how we just kind of softened it up a little bit, just a little bit, slightly more pleasing to the eye. Still not great, but slightly more pleasing. And again, if this was a species I had a ton of shots of, this would probably be a ditch. But I don't have a lot of them. All right, I am going to try adding just a nice big radial around here, invert it, big, soft, gentle vignette is what I'm looking to do here. And I'll drop the highlights on that even more and actually bring the exposure back up. And maybe even lessen contrast more on that as well, just to kind of flatten out that exterior area. And let's take a look at that. I think that helps out a little bit, just to kind of dull down all of that bright, contrasty everything going on out there. So there we go. Just flattening out the photo I think helps out. I'm actually going to add yet another one, throw a linear on the bottom here. See if we can just kind of really stretch this out, make the transition soft, and then just darken it all at the bottom there. And there we go. All right, into Photoshop we go from there. And I think the first thing I'm going to try and do is just minimize this dark spot back there. I'm going to do that by putting a blank layer on there, label it retouch, and then just grab that clone tool and just softly kind of clone over that. A little too much on that one. Let's try again. A little softer up here. And just try to kind of smooth out this background just a little bit. And by smooth, I mean just flatten out the difference between light and dark. I'm not actually blurring it or making it more smooth in the background. So less contrast, I guess, is a better descriptor versus smooth. And let's see. Going to go with the curves adjustment layer. We're going to darken the highlight point a little, darken the upper portion of that curve there. I almost said midtones, but it's not really midtones at that point. And we'll just kind of, again, dim down this front section here and even the rock that he's on. And then we'll zoom in on this bird, add another curves adjustment layer, go ahead and punch up that bird, invert that so it's not affecting anything. And then we'll just paint that in gently in the light areas here and more on the dark areas just to make that bird stand out. That's it. I got nothing else to do to this one. Before, after. It does clean it up and bring your attention a little bit more to that bird. So I think overall a decent edit there. Again, it's certainly not an award-winning image here. It's pretty basic, but it does show off the bird, and these rock wrens are cool. I wish I was recording when I shot them. I had shot them just prior to this in further north in Utah near Great Salt Lake area, and gotten some really amazing light on them there, but I didn't record that particular outing, so you guys are stuck with this strong light version. All right, the light was really strong, so I concentrated on keeping it really flat for this sparrow, and so I wasn't shooting much angles at all. I was keeping the sun right at my back. I do like this bush over here, but I don't like that up there, but I don't think I can fully crop it out up there, so we'll just have to clone some of that out. And I think we can come in a little off that left side just to offset it more. Whole thing's feeling a little dark. I'm actually going to push a little bit lighter here. Let me adjust my brightness because it's getting brighter in the room I'm editing in. I'm going to push my brightness up a good bit here. Shadows up, that really helps to soften things up. I'm going to bring those blacks back down to make sure my black point is good. And I'm just going to stick with this light kind of, I don't want to say washed out, but, you know, almost look and feeling to this photo, which kind of fits this desert, especially when the sun gets really bright. It's just a lot of light tans and browns. That's what we have there. Okay, so I guess it looks like I kind of did eliminate that, or close to eliminate it. Let's start with my retouch layer. I'm just going to even out just some of these spots back here. Just soften those dark spots a little bit, but still leave some variation in back there. That's the key to that. I don't want to make it just all flat one color. To me, that doesn't look right. Okay, curves adjustment layer. Let's take down that foreground a good bit. We'll invert this. Big soft paintbrush. We're just going to paint that in gently across the bottom here, a little bit on the rock. And then that's it. The rest is just going to be, I think, a little added contrast on the bird. Lightness and contrast to just kind of make him pop a little bit. So something like that. We'll bring these black values back down, and that should, in theory, get us a nice, there we go. Look at that when we paint that in, right? Just kind of contrast that bird up, makes him a little bit more saturated. The color stands out really good. What you want to make sure you don't do is that. You don't want to halo it. And I think I may be doing that subtly. So I'm going to go back to the background, select subject. Let's see if it picks it up. There, it did a great job. I'm going to go up to my curves layer that did the lightning and contrast there. Inverse this selection because right now the subject is selected. Inverse it. I'm just going to fill it with black. So just do edit fill, choose black, and that way I make sure, watch. See how there's a little bit of hard edge stuff happening there? Those were areas where my soft painting would have gone into the background and made a slight halo. I think that contrast is a bit much now when I view the whole thing. See that? It's too much. So instead of tweaking the curve, real simple, just lower the opacity on it to somewhere, I'll cut it in almost half. And now we go from that to that. So here's our overall beginning and in Photoshop. That's it. That's all I think I needed to do. Ooh, let's look at this. Is this, I don't know what that is. It's like a weird shadow or something, but it should be easy. Let's grab the spot removal or the spot healing brush. Geez. Get these things between Lightroom and Photoshop all confused all the time. There we go. It does a really good job of just making random connections that look like the rock in there. And that's it. Save that. We'll go back into Lightroom, check the total before and after, and that's it. That's all the edits. So everything really basic on the edits today. Shooting mostly front lit, but you know, nice clean backgrounds is what I was concentrating on, especially when if you watch the shoot, you really see me working to try and get that. I'm going to go ahead and reset this. There's my total before. I underexposed a little bit, and there's my after. That bird's standing out much more. There's the original and the final image. All right. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining me on this short outing to Moab. It was a really cool spot. I love shooting these different habitats like that, and I can't wait to get back out in that direction and hopefully get some more stuff like this, hopefully in that very early morning light or late evening light. But unfortunately, it only lasts for like 15 minutes out there.